Welcome to part 2 of this online video tutorial on the use of count and non-count nouns. In this segment, you're going to learn about the ways to quantify non-count nouns using unit expressions and different categories that determine the non-countability of certain nouns. We will also be looking into those non-count nouns or mass nouns which can also be counted because of its relevance to a classification or type. And finally, we're going to see a few uses of the idiomatic forms of counting non-count nouns. Almost all of us have been to the grocery store checkout and have seen signs like these wanting to skirt the longer lines. Although we must realize that cultural use changes grammar throughout history, how many of us have stopped to think whether this is correct or not? Items are countable things. We have also seen some of the rules regarding quantifiers and determiners before the countable and uncountable nouns. Typically, we would say fewer items and less water, which is an uncountable noun. This only shows that everyone has some confusion about these categories. As we saw in Count and Non-Count Nouns Part 1, there is a fundamental difference between countable things and uncountable things. Water is very different in nature than a cup or cups. Pour some water in a bucket and tell me how many there are. There is one, but one what? Pour some water in a paper cup, and there is also one, but much smaller. So we count these kinds of things by measure or amount that we have of it. This leads us to those unit expressions that precede the non-count nouns that help us to measure the amount we're talking about. Here are some examples containing the reference to the material itself or a specific amount of material. I ate some cheese. I had 2 slices of cheese. The teacher gets chalk on his clothes every time he uses the board. He needs another piece of chalk to put his example on the board. I like the quality of the paper they used in this book. Could you lend me a sheet of paper to do this assignment? As you can see, the quantifier in front of the non-count item helps us to see a specific number or quantity of the item being discussed. Here is a more lengthy list of units of measure that we commonly use, though there are more to be sure. Pause the video here or at any point for reference if necessary. Foods can be counted by their shapes or containers. Liquids are usually counted by their container, but sometimes by their shapes, as in drop or puddle of water. Containers, shapes, and measures frequently apply to other items. The same is true for items in stationery as well. Here's another way to categorize lists of units of measures that we commonly use, though there are more to be sure. Again, pause the video here for reference if necessary. All of these would be followed by the connector of and then by the non-count item described. Measurements follow the same rule. And here are some others. As mentioned earlier, we want to look more deeply into different categories that make up this group of non-count nouns. You will commonly hear many of these referred to as non-count, uncountable, or mass nouns. But they are all essentially talking about the same thing, nouns that cannot be counted in English without quantifiers preceding them. Many non-count nouns are usually referring to whole groups made of similar items. Again, feel free to pause this if you want to reflect on these lists. Here's some for fluids. More for solids. Gases. Particles. Languages. Fields of study. Recreation. Activities. Notice that these and other gerunds are included in this group. Occupations. Natural phenomena. Abstractions. And others, to be sure. When we are talking about non-count nouns that can play both sides of the fence, one of the meanings refers to different types of the item. For example, we all know that milk is a liquid that needs to be counted in a bottle, carton, glass, cup, or etc. However, when you travel to another country and you sense a taste difference, you might refer to each country's milk as a different type. Thus, you could say, the milks of the world vary in their taste because of the different ways the animals are raised. The same is true for coffees. The coffees of the Arabic countries and the Latin American countries have a slightly different taste. In another way, if you think of the meaning of a noun as a continuum from being specific to general and abstract, we can see how it would move from being a count noun to a non-count noun. Consider, for example, the noun experiences. When I say, adverse childhood experiences unfortunately contribute to the makeup of one's adulthood, I'm referring to a specific countable moment in a child's life, or moments. When I say, acquiring a position of leadership requires experience, I'm using the word in an abstract way. It's not something you can count, it's more like an idea, a general thing that people need to have in order to apply for this type of job. If I write, the talks are taking place in the student union. These talks are countable events or lectures. If I say, I hate it when a meeting is nothing but talk, the word talk is now uncountable. I'm referring to the general abstract idea of idle chatter. Evils refers to specific sins, pride, envy, sloth, and everyone's favorite, gluttony, whereas evil refers to a general notion of being bad or ungodly. One more example. I love the works of Beethoven means that I like his symphonies, his string quartets, his concerti or sonatas, or his choral pieces, and they are all very countable things or works. But if I say I hate work, it means that I find the very idea of labor or working in a general way very unappealing. Notice that the plural form means something quite different from the singular form of this word. They're obviously related, but they're different. What's the relationship between plastic and plastics? Wood and woods. Ice, ices. Or hair and hairs. Finally, we have some idiomatic expressions that are peculiar to some words, and these are just a few examples. For example, normally when you're referring to butter, you would quantify it in the United States with the packages or forms that it is found in, such as bars, tubs, pounds of butter, and so on. In restaurants, it is normally served in wrapped slices or little packets, and it's common to hear a customer mention to the waiter or waitress, "Could we have some more butters at our table?" They mean these little packets. The same is true for coffee, meaning cups. We're not referring to the beans or the liquid. We're referring to 2 coffees or 3 coffees. Cups of coffee, that is. Another one is smokes, and this is British English. But smokes is not referring to the smoky, uncountable gas. It's referring to cigarettes in a package. So finally, in this video, we have looked at counting the uncountable things with unit expressions. We have briefly looked at the types of non-count items, such as the coffees of the world. We have seen that there are individual instances of non-count things that can be treated as countable items. And we have looked at a few of the idiomatic expressions of nouns that are typically uncountable, yet referring to countable things. In all cases, you would do best to consult a reference book such as a dictionary to familiarize yourself with questionable words. Happy counting, or not?